Okay, I'm going to do number 7, radical 80p cubed. So do you remember back I used to have to write the perfect squares at 1 through 15 every day. You have to write these down. 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, 5 squared is 25, blah, blah, blah. All the blue numbers that you see are perfect squares. So the perfect squares are 4, 9, 16, 25, 36. 35 is not a perfect square. 36 is a perfect square. 46 is not a perfect square. 49 is a perfect square. So those are going to help you on these. So you have to break it down, clown. You break it down. So 80 will break down into what times what? What times what will give you 80? That's what you have to think. So let's try 2 times 40. 2 times 40 is 80. So I can write this, instead of radical 80, I can put radical 2 times radical 40 times radical p cubed. It means the same thing. Radical 2 times radical 40 is exactly the same thing as radical 80. Same thing. Now, I put that is not a good step, what I just put there. And I put it wrong on purpose to show you why it's wrong. So if I wrote it like that, that would not help you. You know why? Because 2 and 40, they're not perfect squares. So that, breaking it down like that was not helpful. So we want to break it down so it's helpful. We want to find one of these perfect squares to break it down in. So, 4. So I'm going to take this off because that's wrong. I put it wrong on purpose. And a lot of times you'll put it down wrong, but then you'll realize, oh wait, that doesn't help me. That didn't help me. So now I'm going to use 4. That will help me because it's a perfect square. You want to look for your perfect squares. So you know what? It might be helpful to write this down, have this perfect squares right in front of you while you're doing it. So we're going to break it down like square root of 40 and square root of 20. So now we have radical 4, radical 20. That's the exact same thing as radical 80. You just break it down, clown. Now that is helpful because what's the square root of 4? 2. So instead of 4, radical 4, I'll replace it with a 2. So now we have 2 without a radical. Radical 20, radical p cubed. Okay, now we have to break down the 20. What times what will give me 20 using one of these perfect squares? Oh, the 4 again. 4 is a perfect square. So I'm going to put my 2, and I'm going to break this down into radical 4, radical 5. Radical 4, radical 5 is the exact same thing as radical 20. And then, now I can go ahead and do this. I'm going to go ahead and do the p. Get that out of the way. Okay, we're going to break the p squared down into radical p squared. I'm not p cubed. Radical p. Now, how did I do that? Because what's p squared times p? Well, if you have 2 p's and you multiply it by another p, then you've got p to the 3. So this is the same thing as the radical p cubed. So, what is the square? How is that helpful? Because what's the square root of p squared? P. Because you're really saying, what times what will give you p squared? P times p. So the square root of p squared is p. Just like the square root of 25 is 5. Square root of p squared is p. So I'm going to put the p without the radical. So I'm going to put it in front with all the other people that have no radical, with the 2. So I'm not going to put it there. I'm going to put it out here to p. Now I still have my radical 4, my radical 5. Now that's gone because I took it, but I do still have that. Almost done. Now, do you know the square root of 4 or the square root of 5 or the square root of p? You only know the square root of 4, which is 2. So it's going to go with the other people that have no radical. So now you'll have a 2p times, this is 2, radical 5 is still there, and radical p is still there. Now look, 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4. So this is written 4p And you're going to put these back together because you don't want to put radical 5, radical p separately. So you just put radical 5p. Now let me make sure that's the right answer. 4p radical. Yes. So that's how you do that one. Okay, now I'm going to erase that, and then I'm going to do number 1. Okay, erase all that. And number 1 says radical 125 in. Radical 125 in. Okay, so we have to break it down, clown. You break it down. So we're going to break down the radical 125 into, let's see, let's look at our perfect square list and see if we can find a perfect square that would be useful. 25. Think of money and quarters. How many quarters would it take to make $1.25? 5. 5 times 25. 5 times 25 is 125. So we're going to break it down into radical 5 times radical 25, radical in. It's the same thing. I just broke it down. Clown, broke it down. Now, what's the square root of 25? 5 without a radical, so the ones without a radical go in front. So I'm going to take the square root of that, which is 5, and put it out front, but I've still got my radical 5, and I've still got my radical in. Now, you're basically done. You just have to put these together, like under the same radical. So this would be 5. And instead of writing them separately, you just put them back together again. Let me make sure that's the right answer, and it is. So that's number 1. Okay, hope that helped. Good boy.